Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Emily Jashinsky joins us from The Federalist. We'll talk to her about last night's debate and the role that big Democrat donors are playing in all of the chaos across our country. Rich people, these Democrats. Tom Fitton will be joining us at 5 o'clock today. He was one of the people who asked a question last night of the other-than-Trump candidates who were debating each other. And then Pat Fallon, the congressman, joins us at 5:30 today as our immigration crisis just keeps getting worse. Our border crisis keeps getting worse. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A fiery debate last night among the also-rans. And amusing moments, I thought very revealing moments. Like I said, I'll be spending more time on that coming up with Emily. But let me focus first and foremost on what I think should be a headline that's getting a lot more attention, should get a lot more attention today. And that is, your phone is being spied upon by an untold number of governments. And your own government, who may be among the spies, is keeping it secret from you. They're keeping it a secret, or at least they've been trying to. And the reason we know this today is because Democrat Senator Ron Wyden has now revealed this to the public in a letter that he sent to the United States Department of Justice this week. He sent it yesterday. And in the letter, he alleges that unidentified governments are surveilling smartphone users via their push notifications. That is, if you're familiar with a push notification, it's anything that appears on the home screen of your phone, right? So you get a breaking news alert, perhaps, from your favorite news app. Something like, whatever it is. All of those push notifications, the things that are appearing right on the home screen of your phone, are being spied on by a number of, quote, unidentified governments. And this could very well, and probably does, in my estimation, include the United States of America, the U.S. government. Reuters writes it up this way today. In a letter to the Department of Justice, Senator Ron Wyden said that foreign officials were demanding the data from Alphabet's Google and Apple. Although details were sparse, the letter lays out yet another path by which governments can track smartphones. Apps of all kinds rely on push notifications to alert smartphone users to incoming messages, breaking news, and other updates. These are the audible dings or the visual indicators that users get when they receive an email or their sports team wins a game. What users often do not realize is that almost all such notifications travel over Google and Apple's servers. So the notification, even to get to you, has to travel through either Google or Apple's servers, depending on what you use, if you use Android or iOS, respectively. That gives the two companies unique insight into the traffic flowing from those apps to their users, and in turn puts them, quote, in a unique position to facilitate government surveillance of how users are using particular apps, said Wyden, the Democrat, who, I should remind you, whose party has been very happily using the big tech companies as a way to impede your free speech and to surveil you. Wyden asked the Department of Justice to, quote, repeal or modify any policies that hindered public discussions of push notification spying. So Wyden's saying, this is interesting. So this is not fully revealing everything that's going on right now, but you have Wyden, Ron Wyden, who he does have a history of trying to place checks on, including these Democrat administrations. Remember that audio where he confronts John Brennan. Or was it James Clapper, actually? It was James Clapper. He confronts James Clapper about, are you spying on the American people? And remember, the answer was not wittingly. Remember that? That was Ron Wyden who was confronting him about it. And so he has a bit of a history here of going after Democrat administrations for the role that they play in spying on the American people. And here he is asking the Department of Justice to get rid of any policies that prevent public discussion about the push notification spying. How could you prevent public discussion? How could the Justice Department have a policy to prevent public discussion of the ways in which foreign governments are spying on you? How is that even possible? We have a First Amendment, don't we? In a statement, Apple said that Wyden's letter gave them the opening that they needed to share more details with the public about how governments monitored push notifications. Here's what Apple said in their statement in reaction to all of this. And just in the last 24 hours, quote, "In this case, the federal government prohibited us from sharing any information," the company said in a statement. The federal government, the United States government, prohibited us, Apple, from telling users how they were being spied on via their push notifications. This is what Apple is saying here. Quote, "Now that this method has become public, we are updating our transparency reporting to detail these kinds of requests." Further, Google said that it shared Wyden's, quote, "commitment to keeping users informed about these requests." The Department of Justice, Reuters reports, declined to comment on the push notification surveillance or whether it had prevented Apple or Google from talking about it. Well, here's Apple. Apple straight up said that the feds have been prohibiting them from telling us about this. How can they do that? How can they do that? Wyden's letter cited a tip as the source of the information about the surveillance. His staff did not elaborate on the tip, but a source familiar with the matter confirmed that both foreign and U.S. government agencies, you ready? Both foreign and U.S. government agencies have been asking Apple and Google for metadata related to push notifications to, for example, help tie anonymous users of messaging apps to specific Apple or Google accounts. So yes, the U.S. government has been spying on American citizens through your push notifications. It's unavoidable at this point. I mean, do you kind of operate under the assumption at this point that the federal government's probably spying on you? If you don't, you probably should. Just sweeping up all of your communications. The source declined to identify the foreign governments involved in making the requests, but described them as democracies allied to the United States. Okay, well, that rules out a couple of places, doesn't it? China would not be a democracy that's allied to the United States. North Korea, Iran, these are not democracies allied to the United States. No, this is the United Kingdom. This is me just spitballing, but this is the UK. This is Australia. This is Germany. These are presumably Western democracies that are spying on push notification activity via these major tech companies. And Apple was forbidden from telling us about this by our own government. The source, speaking to Reuters, said they did not know how long such information had been gathered in that way. Most users give push notifications little thought, but they have occasionally attracted attention from technologists because of the difficulty of deploying them without sending data to Google or Apple. Earlier this year, French developer David Lebeau said that users and developers were often unaware of how their apps emitted data to the U.S. tech giants via push notifications, calling them a privacy nightmare. Well, just as a basic matter, if you're at all concerned about your privacy, this might be a good opportunity to say no more push notifications. Just shut your push notifications off if you'd like a little bit less spying. It won't be dramatically less spying, I would imagine. I doubt that's the only way. I'm sure there's a lot more that the feds are up to with spying on you. But here we have just a major story. Again, Reuters reporting it, but it's Senator Ron Wyden whose letter revealed all of this. And he is left in a position because his party doesn't support this. I guess he's by himself. He's begging the Department of Justice to repeal policies that, quote, hinder public discussion, that prevent the American people from even knowing about this, that prevent American companies from even talking about this. And it's happening yet again. So this is the latest iteration of how the American government is spying on its own people. And how foreign governments are doing that as well. And the feds are just trying to cover it all up. Cover it all up. And yet, we still can't get information on whether Joe Biden was sitting next to Hunter when Hunter was threatening the family's financiers, right? We can't get geolocation data on whether or not Joe was seated next to Hunter. Remember, Hunter said, I'm seated here right next to my father, and I promise you, with all of the power that he has, we will make your life a living hell unless you send us millions of dollars. To this day, the American people do not know who was in that room, where they were. Biden just insisting until he's blue in the face that none of this is even real. Biden saying yesterday that he's had no interactions with any of the family's financiers. None whatsoever. We don't even know who you're talking about. All these people that pay us money, I've never met with them, never talked to them. These are all lies. said Biden yesterday. But, of course, what he's doing is a brazen lie. Easily established. Easily established. And I'll be talking about that in part with Congressman Pat Fallon coming up at 5:30 today. He's on the House Oversight Committee. And that's an important place to be, isn't it? Especially in light of the fact that you've got Hunter Biden, who is, I don't know, still playing this game of I don't have to testify even though the Congress has sent me a subpoena. I can do it on my own terms. I don't have to appear when you tell me or how you tell me. So we're going to ask Congressman Pat Fallon about this. What? Really? Can Hunter Biden do that? Is that a unique privilege that he has? And what are the consequences if you tell Congress up yours when they send you a subpoena? What are the consequences for that? And does it change if your last name's Biden? So we'll be exploring that detail coming up. But this is, this whole thing about the United States government spying on us by way of these big tech companies, this is fascism. It's textbook fascism, actually. When you get the government and major corporations working together to deprive you of liberties, how else can you define that? Right? Mussolini's definition of fascism. That's what we're seeing happen here. And so God bless the people who are exposing this. I'm thankful to Ron Wyden this week. I'm thankful to him for this. I would assume, I don't spend a great deal of time digging into all of Ron Wyden's policy positions, but I would assume I have blanket disagreement with almost all of them. But on this particular front, and at least in the past, in some of the audio we played, I'm content to say he's the one who's exposing this. Why is it only Ron Wyden? Why is it a Democrat senator who's doing this? Why aren't there more Republican senators doing this? And why aren't they more up at arms about all of it? If Washington is anything, it's disappointing, right? How many members of Congress do we have that are just complete disappointments? Just ran into Chris Plant here at the station. Chris was leaving. I was coming. I was coming into the building, and of course, it's always a problem because once we do that, we lose 45 minutes of time talking to one another about everything that's going on in the world. And we were commiserating over this particular issue. It was like, how is Washington this disappointing all the time? And it's not just the lefties who are actively working against you. It's the guys on the right who don't seem to have a lot of stomach for standing up for you. I said to Chris, I was like, look, how many members of Congress do you think wake up every morning obsessed with doing the business of the American people? Just obsessed. They get up and they think, I've got to get to work. There's a lot to fix. I've got to do this right now for the American people. How many? Can you count them on one hand? Is it one hand? Is that generous? One hand? Because, Ukraine goes to war, every member of Congress is wearing a lapel pin of a different country's flag. They're all supercharged up. They're all standing on the Capitol steps. They all have something to say. Everybody wants to moralize to you. This is America's fight. We've got to do this, on and on and on. But no passion about that for the border. At least this week, we're seeing a little bit of a heartbeat from some Senate Republicans when it comes to the border. But even that is I'm concerned about that. They say that they're fighting for a border package instead of sending more money to Ukraine right away. And that's all well and good, but what is that border package even going to do? What's it even going to do, right? Because Biden's plan for the border is more amnesty. Biden wants more money. Why? To fund the conveyor belt of illegal immigrants into the country. That's what they want. They don't want to extend the wall. They want to extend the conveyor belt. Apparently, we've run out of rubber stamps. They need to manufacture more rubber stamps to accelerate people into the country. That's what they want the money for. That's what Biden. So when Biden says, I want $14 billion for the border, that's what he's talking about. Conveyor belt funding is what he wants, not wall funding. And so these Republicans need to stand up against it big time and start going after these agencies too. We're literally stopping an American company from communicating to the American people that they're being spied on. How is that not a violation of the First Amendment?
All of us see it on video. We confront you out on the debate stage. You say you didn't say it, and then you back away. And I want to say
exactly what I said, Chris.
I'm not done yet.
Well, this
now
is
look.
This is
and
nonsense. This man is spewing. This man is spewing nonsense.
Let me tell you something. This is the fourth debate that you would be voted in the first 20 minutes as the most obnoxious blowhard in America. So shut up for a little while.
It was a nice event. Everyone got along last night at the debate, the News Nation debate. It was remarkable for any number of reasons. It's funny. It's weird that we're having these debates, and so Trump's not on the stage at all, right? Trump, and who's leading all of them in landslide numbers. That right now, this is the also-ran debate. It was the fourth debate. I will say it was kind of fun to watch, at least. I mean, there was an entertainment factor, like a Roman Coliseum. Like, it was like, yes, fight for me. Fight for me. And they're like, you yelling from the stands. But, it was kind of weird, the whole thing. Chris Christie has demonstrated that he's exactly the kind of Republican who sits on ABC news panels and then gives them commentary as if it's from a broadly Republican perspective, right? It's just, he's a cartoon character. He's a fat Liz Cheney. And not much of a big constituency or anything, but he's certainly got a big presence. And he has the talent to make it seem like he's telling you like it is. Although I will say in Christie's case last night, massive disappointment, although it's been going on for a while. His mind is so corrupted by thinking about Trump and hating Trump that he can't even acknowledge that the United States Department of Justice, where Chris Christie once worked, is an entirely corrupt enterprise that is punishing both Trump and anybody who ever supported him. Like, you've got to call that out. Instead, he was acting like Trump was rightly set upon by the Justice Department. It's really the consequences of his actions. Come on. It makes you a rube. If you really believe that, you're a rube. That's true. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley had a bad night last night. She was sitting there stone-faced like she couldn't respond to any of the remarks that Vivek Ramaswamy had about her. He laid out a pretty good case that she's corrupt, that she was enriched by all of the organizations that she helped while she was both a governor and a UN ambassador. Ron DeSantis looked good. It was his best debate, I thought. He spoke up for himself. He was able to fight back against the attacks on him last night. And Vivek, man, that guy's on fire. The media hates that guy so much. They hate everything about him. They all sound like Chris Christie. Who are you? Who do you think you are? And meanwhile, he's smarter than all of them. He's way smarter than they are. In fact, he went on CNN last night after the debate and embarrassed Dana Bash. She was like, what do you mean January 6th was an inside job? He's like, allow me to explain. And CNN, I guarantee you the production booth, they were looking to figure out a way out of that as Vivek just eviscerated her. Coming up, Emily Jashinsky will offer some reaction to the debate last night. She joins us just moments away. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Tom Fitton joins us, president of Judicial Watch. He was one of the questioners last night during that debate. He'll be here at 5 o'clock. At 5:30, Congressman Pat Fallon joins us. We talk about the latest on the southern border, the crisis down there, and also the investigation into Joe Biden. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A lot of fireworks last night at that debate. Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy. Among the people watching it very closely is my next guest, Emily Jashinsky. She's a culture editor at the Federalist, a co-host of Counterpoints as well, and the fill-in host for Megyn Kelly last night as the debate was going on. Emily, good to have you with us today.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Fascinating to watch these guys fight it out. It's so funny how, animated they are in light of the fact that none of them is going to be the nominee.
That's a really good reminder. Sometimes it feels like we're watching a normal debate and you have to actually sort of snap back into reality and realize the guy who's up by double digits, and double digits, by the way, not just in the national polling average, but basically in every early voting state, he's not even on the stage. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting just to hear the inter-party debates on some of these issues and to kind of have these representatives from different sides of the conservative spectrum, somebody who's really gotten to the point where they're borderline Democrat like Chris Christie, but also somebody with such a neoconservative foreign policy like Nikki Haley, be pressed by Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis pressing Nikki Haley on trans issues. There's always something interesting about it, even if it doesn't matter at all in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, but it does helpfully, I think, expose that there is, among Republican leaders, if you can call them that there is, unfortunately, some holdouts from sanity, right? So, if Nikki Haley is up there saying it's fine for parents to trans their kids, and Chris Christie is saying that the Justice Department is not corrupt, everything seems to be fine, and and Donald Trump is only being held accountable for his own actions. It's like, what land do these people come from?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 100%. I actually think, I know people are getting a little annoyed with Vivek. I think there's a hardcore contingent that has some great reasons to like Vivek Ramaswamy. I thought his sort of very performative, loud act, which can be very entertaining, and he does make some good points. I thought it came off a little differently when you only had 4 candidates on the stage, as opposed to when you had 10. They're all jockeying for time, and it was extra entertaining. But I really, really think that the benefit to having him up there is even Ron DeSantis hasn't totally embraced sort of the MAGA movement. That's actually maybe been one of the big problems with his candidacy. And Vivek being there actually really forces these candidates to answer to, I think, positions that reflect the median Republican voter more than a lot of the positions these candidates have been taking. And I include in that Ron DeSantis, who was supposed to be the opposite of that. So, there is, to your point, Vince, there really is some value in seeing these clashes happen.
Yes, definitely, because it speaks to kind of the way a lot of Republicans in Washington are. They kind of run the gamut between all of those people that were on that stage, from Chris Christie, who really is just a cable news commentator, to be honest with you, the kind that most broadcast networks like because he voices positions that Democrats agree with, all the way to Vivek Ramaswamy, who is channeling, as you point out, the MAGA base, the people who, like Trump, want to see him be returned to the presidency or would like at least his policies to return to the presidency.
And, I thought that was the real benefit of this debate that was hosted by News Nation, and you had Megyn Kelly and Eliana Johnson of the Washington Free Beacon, part of the moderators, because they don't absolutely despise the positions of Republican voters and actually Republican voters themselves. They don't see in these positions bigotry and hatefulness and racism and resentment. No, they have a fundamental mutual respect for Republican voters, and that allowed them to have much better questions than any of the other corporate outlets who've hosted debates so far. And I would note, I think it's very odd. The RNC came out with an announcement today that they're doing a couple of debates in January with CNN.
Yeah, what is that?
After this, it's bizarre. I mean, after this experiment in really allowing independent journalists and people who are ideologically more aligned with Republican voters to host a debate, after it's so successful, it goes so well, they turn around within 24 hours and say they're going to give CNN an opportunity to launder its bias as neutrality in the interest of what? Helping Republican voters decide who they want to pick for president of the United States? I mean, it's absurd. It's completely out of touch and just so tone deaf today.
Doesn't it kind of feel like it's a middle finger to the right, like for the RNC to do that? Because remember, I mean, the conversation that led up to this debate, where you get the Free Beacon and Megyn Kelly up on that debate stage, and Megyn Kelly's been a fascinating story all the way back to her, hosting the first debate in 2016 and mixing it up with Trump. But then after her, her leaving the news business and getting out of, the mainstream news business of Fox and the NBC world, she's kind of broken out and done her own thing, and she's been fantastic. She's just been aggressive. I know you're close to her. You go on her show a lot. She's been great, and I thought she was a perfectly fitting moderator last night, and it felt like this was responsive to the concerns that the right had, meaning like the base. Republicans were looking at this going, why does the RNC keep on doing all these legacy media debates? That's not what we were told we were going to get. And so this was different, and that was nice. And now it's back to form, the CNN thing?
Right, within 24 hours. I mean, really, it was within 12 hours. I agree with the middle finger point. And yeah, Megyn is really interesting. I'm obviously biased, but I thought the whole debate, the whole production of the debate was just so much more illuminating for Republican voters. And the RNC owes it to their voters to organize debates that are helpful to their voters, not that are helpful to them with their donors, but debates that are helpful to the voters. And if I were one of the remaining candidates, I would very seriously consider refusing to comply with the RNC, putting them in that situation, or I would make it very clear that I'm coming into that debate to debate with CNN, probably more than the other candidates, because listen, Vince, you and I both agree these candidates should get the toughest possible questions. And that happened last night. It's just the questions weren't laundering biased framing as neutral framing. They weren't claiming that facts aren't facts. They were actually so smart. The exchange between Megyn Kelly, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Chris Christie on trans ideology and children, that was fact-based. It was sharp. It was tough. And it was so much more useful
and
than
CNN,
any 5 minutes of a debate so far.
CNN would have never asked that question. CNN would not be – there would be no conversation whatsoever about the abuse of children when it comes to this deranged gender ideology. None. They wouldn't even dare to ask it. They'd be too scared to even suggest it, and that they'd be fired or that they'd lose advertisers, something. But Megyn did ask about it, and that was good. I thought that was useful. And that's why it's meaningfully different, and at least it's grounded in reality.
Yeah, and I think it was CNN that confronted Joe Biden with a trans child back when he was running in 2020 in a town hall. And that was when Biden said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing him, but to the effect of, yes, gender transitions for minors, I'm totally okay with it. That will be protected under my administration. So CNN's happy to talk about trans ideology. They're happy to talk about the border. They're happy to talk about all of these things. But the way that they're pressing candidates, Republican candidates on them is, okay, so tell me why you're a bigot. Okay, tell me why you hate transgender people. And listen, candidates, again, they should be able to answer those questions,
yes,
but those questions are not neutral. And the networks, the RNC is letting the networks pretend that those are neutral questions when they absolutely are not. They're letting networks lie to voters, and they're letting networks make money off of lying to their voters.
Yeah.
There's just no reason for it anymore.
All right, let me move to the issue of money with you for a moment. Now, I know you said that in your view that it was kind of a mixed bag with Vivek last night. I thought Vivek was great throughout, and I thought that he did a nice job of emphasizing how Nikki Haley's time in politics has led to her being enriched. And he said, look, she's very corrupt. And if I can add something to the stack on that particular beat. This week we found out that Democrat mega donor Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, has given a massive donation to Nikki Haley's presidential campaign, $250,000 to her super PAC. And she's been asked about this. I think as recently as this morning she was asked about it, and she said she doesn't really even know who that is, which is preposterous because if you're this high up in American politics, you should know who Reid Hoffman is. He's one of the most prolific Democrat donors in the country. He funded the lawsuit by E. Jean Carroll against Trump. He's made it his life's work to destroy Trump. He promised in this campaign he will do everything he can to destroy Trump. And he also, by the way, at one point funded a disinformation campaign in Alabama. And he would go on to apologize for it, but he was responsible for paying for fake news. This is like the worst person. This is like the George Soros guy. So what's the deal here, Emily, like with this big Democrat money going towards Nikki Haley?
Yeah, I mean, and we saw this from Jamie Dimon as well, obviously the head of J.P. Morgan, who's said something to the effect of, Democrats, you might want to consider supporting Nikki Haley because she's probably the best chance to beat Donald Trump. So I think that's really what this is about, is that actually and Nikki Haley mentioned this in the debate last night, it's true, there are some Wall Street power brokers who were initially thinking, hey, maybe we'll consolidate behind Ron DeSantis early in this race. He seems like a viable candidate. He seems more palatable to Donald Trump. Now, a lot of those voters or a lot of those donors got scared off by the totally false book ban narrative and started to see Ron DeSantis as, maybe someone who is a little too, in their perception, extreme. And then DeSantis' candidacy has had some very real problems. So I think they see Nikki Haley with the momentum, and they say, she will basically be supportive of corporate America. She'll basically be supportive of a neoconservative foreign policy. Let's just get behind Nikki and get Trump over with. Let's move on to a new era. So I think that's the Wall Street interest. But she also, she said last night that Ron DeSantis was just jealous that these people were now supporting her. And actually, Reid Hoffman, Jamie Dimon, I Googled this, Jamie Dimon and Larry Fink. I mean, Ron DeSantis is like enemy number one of Larry Fink, but none of those guys were supportive of Ron DeSantis. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And none of those guys were supportive of Ron DeSantis. She's actually picking up new Dem-leaning billionaires. And I think that goes to the point. They sort of think that there might be some blood in the water, and that's their best bet at beating Trump.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, let's talk about other ways the left has been spending its money, because you've written on this subject today. You write, the problem with elite complaints about elite schools. We've heard a lot from basically rich lefties lately who've been supporting many of these high-profile colleges across the country, which are now very publicly exposed as breeding grounds for some of the worst bigotry in the country. And you're watching some big lefty donors run away now and saying, I'm not supporting this. I can't believe I supported this in the first place. I refuse to finance all this anti-Semitism we're seeing. How did it get this way, Emily?
Yeah. No, and the article was really written in response to another left-leaning billionaire, Bill Ackman, tweeting his outrage about the sort of laughable congressional testimony that the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn gave earlier this week, where Elise Stefanik, Republican from New York, pressed them hard on whether calls for a genocide of Jewish people would constitute harassment and bullying under their codes of conduct. And they hedged, they were just protecting themselves with this crazy tangled legalese. It was laughable. And the point is, this has been going on for decades. And I think it's great that some people on the center left are waking up to it now, that they've seen since October 7th. There's some real racism and bigotry that has blossomed, that has metastasized in the shadow of our cultural interest in what's happening in academia. That's great. But I think what's more important to realize is that this is something that needs to be, dug up by its roots. And its roots, I don't believe that a lot of these center-left billionaires are willing to actually attack the roots. I think it's really important for people to kind of humbly start thinking about the foundation of their own moral worldviews, their own moral order, and realize that, if you were born in the last half century, there's a very good chance you're buying into some faulty premises about the world, about the United States, about the United States history and its role in the world. This is all coming from something that is much more common than even people on the center left realize. They have allowed something to fester. And if they want to tackle the problem of anti-Semitism on college campuses, they have to tackle a much deeper problem, and that's really simply just moral relativism.
I mean, when you teach everybody that their race is their destiny, this is, of course, the obvious effect of that. This is the result of that. Like, people start thinking their race is their destiny, and they judge other people on the basis of immutable characteristics. It's all over these campuses, and I've been saying throughout all of this, like, it's a little rich for all of these rich guys to be coming out and going, like, I'm not going to fund any of this anymore. Where have you been? You've been funding this for years.
Exactly. It's the world of my truth and your truth and multiple truths with an S, making the truth plural. It's not a world that anybody actually wants to live in. It's a world that maybe people were really comfortable with for a few decades because it made them sort of feel good about themselves and their contributions to the world. But it's ultimately a horrible world to live in, the world of my truth and your truth. And that's what this is about at the end of the day is, when you go through the public school system and, go to some of these colleges, like I did, I was born in 1993, went to public school in Wisconsin, went to George Washington University out here in DC, and you take a step back and realize what was planted, the seeds that were planted in your mind over the course of that education, over the course of the cultural conditioning that you got from Hollywood movies, et cetera, you really realize that unless you've been intentional about your faith, unless you've been intentional about American history, about truth, then you may have slipped into some really, really bad premises about this country, about your community, about your neighbors. And that takes a whole lot more than condemning anti-Semitism. That's going to require condemning moral relativism essentially at its core.
Yeah. And the truth is, like, we're all far more impressionable than we all want to admit. It's like, over time, if that canvas is covered in all sorts of awful things, then it kind of makes you an awful person. And you should, take an inventory, and assess your political ideology, figure out whether or not you're on the right track, actually look deeply at these things and not just credulously believe everybody around you, which is, of course, why we're in
really
so much
well
chaos. Hey,
yeah, I agree with that.
Emily, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, as always.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
Of course, Emily Jashinsky over at The Federalist and on Counterpoint.
Why am I the only person on the stage, at least, who can say that January 6th now does look like it was an inside job?
Vivek Ramaswamy last night, just going for broke here. And what ensued after the debate, another debate on CNN on this subject, I'll have that for you coming up.